Ex-inmates, what was the stupidest thing you've seen a new inmate do on his first day in prison? There is an old myth that if you challenged the meanest guy in your block to a fight, everyone else would leave you alone. It's true, no one will torment you if you're dead. Kid tried it and got dropped off the 5th tier. First day in Gen Pop, last day in Gen Pop. Most guys just want to do their time alone. Most SA and violence in prison is about debt or tax. If you play it straight, 98% of the guys will just leave you alone. Effing someone up on the yard makes your time worse, not better. Loss of privilege, of time in solitary. Most people don't want that. Most of the straight-up psychopaths are in 23-1 lockdown anyway. You get in debt or shoot your mouth off and you'll get settled or taxed. Both are to be avoided. Story 2. This may not have been his first day, but I'll never forget this. This while I was in the intake tank, which is the first tank or section you go into after being processed in county. This young kid comes into county and keeps complaining that he doesn't get his cannabinol and other marijuana-related prescriptions in jail. He was really arrogant and constantly pissing everyone off. During count one day, as we're all in our bunks, he starts complaining again and then says to the guard, "What if we all riot?" Immediately, like 10 other guys yell very loudly, "We don't know," or agree with him. The guard then says, "What the F did you say?" The kid then continues about rioting and that he has rights. Everyone in the tank effing stays like frozen in their bunk, trying their best to be non-threatening, and also show they have no interest in what this moron is saying. So the guard picks him up by his throat and slams him into the wall. After scaring the kid crapless, he explains he has a new charge for inciting a riot. Kid gets hauled off to solitary. Never saw him again, but heard he spent the rest of his 30, 60, 90, whatever amount days in solitary. Absolutely insane to me that he'd say that in a effing county jail. Story 3. Went in when I was a young idiot. Our pod was all bunk beds, no cells, just the room with beds, and a side room with the TV. It was a unit for all the people working the same job. New guy comes in, little white dude. Quiet and kept to himself, until one night, out of nowhere, he starts sprinting around the room, singing at the top of his lungs in the tune of Black Sabbath's Iron Man, but changed the lyrics to, "I am the N-word man, running through the hood from the Ku Klux Klan." Everyone was just kind of frozen for about 15 seconds, seriously confused. Then someone tripped him, and then it was just mayhem until the CO could get enough help to disperse the crowd. I remember being surprised he survived. Everyone in the unit had steel-toe boots for the job we did, holding them and hitting him with them instead of wearing and kicking. The scene afterwards where all the guys are trying to figure out whose boots are whose and comparing who's had the most blood was freaking surreal. Story 4. I did 14 years in federal prison for wire fraud. I got out last February. I'm 36. Some things I can say are these. While your sexuality may not be an issue outside of prison, inside prison, male inmates who are openly gay are generally disrespected. Gambling and drugs create debts that are at some point unable to be paid and can result in serious issues for yourself. Most prisons operate a social hierarchy based on gang affiliations or hometowns, although there can be large separations based on race. However, SAers and child SAers will basically be free game for anyone who wants to take their crap or torment them. You might have been a badass outside of prison, but generally you can't fight several people at once, which is what would happen if you talk about how much of a badass you are. Keep your crap to yourself and don't talk crazy to people, which is seen as disrespect. Respect and disrespect has a different meaning in prison, and you'll figure it out. Best to just keep to yourself as much as possible unless you want to embrace prison life and become institutionalized. Prison is not a place to make friends. Story 5. I got bunk restriction while I was in jail on one of my first nights. Twice a day they did roll call, and we all had to sit in our bunk and be quiet while the officer came bunk to bunk and checked all of our wristbands and made sure we were all who we are. Halfway through while he was doing this, someone rips the loudest, fattest, longest wet fart I've ever heard in my life. Me, having the mind of a 5-year-old, burst into laughter. I've never heard a fart like this in my life. A few other guys laugh, but even thinking of it now, I giggle about it. Anyways, the officer's like, "All right, settle down," but I can't stop laughing about it, and he tells me to calm down, but I tell him through my tears of laughter, I literally cannot help it. I really couldn't. It was the funniest thing that happened the few days I was in there. Anyway, he gets pissed, and I try to explain I'm not trying to be rude and disobey him through my laughter, but he isn't having it. Luckily, he just gave me bunk restriction and didn't punish everyone, but I could see the TV from my bunk, so I just hung out the rest of the night. Story 6. Spent a year in a Bangkok prison. Saw lots of crap go down, but the one story I have that's relevant to your question has to be this English guy that turned up one day. It was actually the first and only other British guy I would encounter while I was there, and the moment he came through the gates, I was called over to try and communicate and translate for him. He was refusing to talk to anyone, basically going on a silent strike because he thought he wasn't supposed to be there, and they were denying his human rights and all that crap. First thing that happens when you enter the prison is they shave your head. This kid had massive dreadlocks and didn't want anyone touching them, but at this point he had already made his bed, and he was going to have to sleep in it. I went over to him and introduced myself, asked him what his name was, where he was from, etc., but he just stared at me in silence the whole time. One of the grounds gave me a photocopy of his passport so I could see his name, age, and where he was from, etc. Against all odds, this kid was actually from my hometown, so my face lit up. Finally, I would have someone to talk to, and I'm sure we would chat crap and bond while we were in there. God, did I need that. But he just refused to engage with anyone, even me, who was trying so hard to get a word out of him. I explained over and over that he'd lost the game. He's in prison now and there's no way out of it, so just do what the guards say. They're going to shave your head first of all, and there's nothing you can do about it. Because no one had explained to me exactly what was going on, I was just confused why he wasn't talking to me. The more I spoke to him, and the more he refused to talk back, the more pissed off I got. I just couldn't understand why he was being so difficult, and by the end of our encounter, I was effing shouting at him, telling him to stop being such a little female dog and just accept your fate. I didn't know if he was retarded or genuinely couldn't speak, but it became clear that he was just putting on an act. Eventually, I just told all the guards there's F all I can do if he's not willing to speak, so go ahead and do what you've got to do. I said my goodbyes to him and told him he really needs to accept his fate. It will be easier on everyone, and when you're ready to talk, I'll be here because, let me tell you, that's the best thing you could hope for in a place like this. He ended up being pinned down by the guards and his dreads shaved off while he was screaming and screaming. Of course, I felt bad, but come on, time to swallow your pride, mate. He was then admitted to the prison and he came to sit with me. He still refused to speak, so I got a notebook and pen and we communicated via writing for a few days. The guards didn't know what to do with him and all the prisoners just thought he was a mental case. I still wasn't sure myself. After a few days of gossip, another prisoner told me that the kid was faking it. When I asked how he knew, he told me that he was arrested at the same police station with him, and the whole time he was in custody, this kid had been screaming bloody murder at the officers, claiming the violation of human rights and all that crap. Then, one day, when I was having a chat with him by means of writing, he started asking me about the embassy, and I told him about what services they offer and how they can help, etc. He then wrote down on the paper, "Can I make a phone call through the embassy?" I just looked at him dead on and said, "What good is a phone call if you can't effing talk?" I couldn't help but chuckle, and he knew the gig was up. At least with me it was. Not long after that, the kid was taken from the prison and carted off to a mental health institution so they could evaluate him. I didn't see him for a few weeks when he suddenly reappeared looking very disheveled and completely traumatized. And wouldn't you know it, he could suddenly speak. He started telling me about the horrors of the mental institution he'd just experienced, and my God, it sounded effing awful. Even worse than the hellhole I was currently in, which was really saying something. We bonded for the month or so he was there and we exchanged details. I've spoken to him since I've been out, and it turns out we have a fair amount of mutual friends, which is one hell of a coincidence. Anyway, the point of this story was he was a effing idiot for simply not cooperating with the guards and the prison rules. It's all well and good putting up a fight in the courts and with the local police, but once you're past that and you find yourself in prison, just effing do as you're told. They can make life so much worse for you. So this is something that I've often wondered on, and, I understand that sometimes mental disabilities and handicaps and things like that can come into play, but the people that are just openly defiant, even while in prison, like at that point, why would you drive the nail even further into yourself like that? Never understood it, and this is a perfect example why. Story 7. Long but funny story. I worked for a PD. We arrested a local regular on an outstanding FTA warrant. The guy was always a PITA. The county jail was full, so we were contracted with an adjacent county jail nicknamed the Workhouse. It was old and nasty and had a much tougher urban clientele. It took about 45 minutes to drive there, and on the way, the prisoner was being chatty. He asked me to do him a favor when we got to the jail, which was, don't put me in with any of those GD N-words. We get to the jail and sit a prisoner on the bench. There's a large black woman working the intake desk, and she and I process the paperwork. 15 minutes later, I'm headed out the door when I stop and look at the prisoner on the bench. I turn to the woman and say, "Oh yeah, I forget, he has a request." The prisoner starts violently shaking his head. "No!" The woman chuckles and says, "Oh yeah? What's that?" I repeat his request that he doesn't want to be put in with any GD N-words. Her eyes get real big and she smiles at me saying, "Yes sir, I'll take care of that." The prisoner looked like he was going to pass out. She immediately called for 2 guards who came from the back dragging logging chains. These were 2 black guys who looked like they were linebackers in the NFL. I smiled at the prisoner and walked to my cruiser. Story 8. More stupid employee. A good friend, Steve, worked as a locksmith for a medium security prison. A really unpleasant job, apparently. He bid on and got the job as a groundskeeper. He was the only actual prison employee, and this 4-man staff were trustee prisoners. The job was overseeing grounds using tractors, hand mowers, and lawn equipment. Some minor repairs were allowed, and the shop had tools for repairs. The groundskeeping hut was not on the actual prison grounds, but had its own unmonitored employee driveway and employee entrance. There was a separate locked fence driveway that went directly into the prison. This was how the prisoners and equipment came and went. The trustees were only searched when they returned to the prison guards, either on the mowers or when returning to their cells. Otherwise, the groundskeeping hut was not frequently inspected. It was a plum prisoner job. My friend bought an older Harley, which ran but not very well. One trustee was made a motorcycle gang member, and my friend and he bonded over motorcycles. One day, Steve brought his motorcycle to work and showed it to the trustee. The trustee listened to the motor and said the bike needed bearings, which means an overhaul. A $4,000 job. If Steve could bring the crew in an hour or 2 before they were supposed to return to their cells, the trustee felt he could use that extra hour to overhaul the bike in a few weeks, and in the first days he totally disassembled the Harley's motor. Later that day, while returning to the prison, the trustee got caught smuggling in a small screwdriver, which meant this trustee crew would never return. Steve knew the groundskeeping hut would be inspected the next morning, and he got the motorcycle frame and wheels onto a pickup and taken out the shop. He didn't have time to get the motor parts, which he would claim were leftover lawnmower parts, but he knew that unmistakable motorcycle frame with wheels was his termination. The next day, the inspectors glanced at the parts and made him take all the extra parts to a secure dumpster. He was reprimanded for not inventorying tools daily and having loose mower parts. The Harley was toast, but he actually kept his job. Story 9. Here in Canada, there isn't really any SA in prisons as they look at it like, how can we beat up or kill sex offenders if we're ones ourselves? It was my first time in a federal pen and I didn't know this golden rule. The first day I got there, I was assigned a cell, and when I went in, this older guy was in it. My future cellmate. He told me the guy who had the bunk before me wasn't really a clean guy, and I should get some disinfectant and a mop, and pointed me in the direction of the cleaning supplies room. I went in, and I was filling my mop bucket when I looked up and noticed these kind of shelves on the wall that said Government of Canada on them. In the shelves were condoms and lube and bleach. My eyes widened and I went back to my cell and whispered loudly to my cellie, "What the F? They're encouraging SA?" I told him about the condoms and he laughed. "Bro, there's gay guys in here who have consensual sex and it's their way of stopping HIV. We just use the bleach to clean our tattoo needles and dye our hair if we get bored." Story 10. Never been an inmate, but I did work as a jailer for a short period of time. I was always assigned to the felony pod, so I knew there were a certain number of guys in those pods that didn't really give a F, but I didn't mess guys around or be an a-hole for no reason, so I was well liked by most of the inmates. One guy came in, his first trip to the slammer, because he got zanned out and drove into a gas station, then proceeded to snag some cigarettes and other convenience items. I often considered the lifers to be the most laid back, especially the older ones. Don't F them and they won't F you, but mess with them and they'll mess back hard. So this day I was sitting at one of the tables chatting with a couple of the older long-term residents, and this new guy comes in and sits at the table. The old-timers ask the new guy, "So, what are you in for?" This effing kid never even looks up and just says, "Murder." I knew what he was in for. He knew what he was in for, and these other 2 well-experienced prison attendees knew damn well he wasn't there for murder. One of them almost snatched him from across the table. I intervened quickly and explained to the kid that this experience could be as crappy as he wanted to make it, or as simple. He could lay low and be in and out and back to his regular life, or he could enter this darker world by being a smartass when asked a simple question. I'm sure he was just scared, being being his first time in and wanted to maybe make a big bad impression. But telling two killers that you killed when you barely have hair on your nuts is a very bad first step. If I recall correctly, he stayed in 3 days waiting to bond out, and he didn't leave his cell other than to grab his tray and scarf down his food. He never even looked toward the shower. Yet once again, I feel like flexing in prison and just trying to come across as a badass is a bad move because people are going to resent that. There's a lot of egos flowing in the slammer, and yeah, they'll just strengthen numbers. They'll take you out. Story 11. Not prison, but jail. It was always dumb stuff that we would prank them with. One example is having someone get a look at their name on the wristband and then going to the phone like they were answering it. They would then yell the new guy's name and look around. The new guy would finally say, "That's me." And then the guy on the phone would say, "Oh, here, it's for you." When the new guy walked over and said, "Hello," the whole pod would start laughing. You don't just get phone calls in jail. Another was messing with new cellmates. One cellmate and I had been cellmates for a while, so when we got our third in cell, we'd lay down a cell schedule for him, with all ridiculous things such as, after lights out, we did 200 jumping jacks every Wednesday. We'd get to Wednesday and tell him to slide his portable bed under the bottom bunk, start doing jumping jacks and counting them off. They would 100% of the time join in, and we'd casually get to 20 or so before we couldn't contain our laughter, and then explain that there was no cell schedule for jumping jacks. One time, I'd been in for about a year, a total of 15 months, and had some clout at that point. I'm not a hard ass, but I can handle my own and have only been in 2, necessary self-defense, fights in that time. With more time in jail comes certain privileges. You get a better seat by the TV. You get into the front line for meals, etc. A new guy came into the pod that day, and I heard the door click open for food to be served. Even though most people were already lined up after the announcement to line up, I went to the front and got my food first, as did others with much more time than most. This is jail, not prison, so anything over a year is a fairly long stay in the county I was in. Apparently, this new guy didn't take too kindly to me specifically going to the front. He started staring at me for the rest of the day. A mean mug, if you will. I took a shower, and when I got out, an inmate came up to me and told me the new guy told him that he planned on just straight up sucker punching me. Here's the thing, don't ever tell anyone that, especially if you're new and don't know anyone. I was well liked throughout the pod and didn't have problems with anyone, for the most part. I was generous to those who were hungry. I was a damn fine card player. I had a sense of humor and wasn't a hard ass. I didn't tolerate disrespect from race to race, and I sure as hell didn't plan on getting sucker punched. So I, in front of the whole pod, said, "Hey man, I hear you've got it in your head that you're gonna sucker punch me. Is this true?" He said it was true. I politely asked him into my cell for an actual fight, not some female dog-ass sucker punch. Don't go into someone's cell for a fight, by the way. Who knows what they have prepared to attack you with? I didn't have anything but my fists, though. I proceeded to beat the crap out of him, like he didn't get a single shot in on my face. His head and face was left bloodied and lumped. I will say that when the guards asked him what happened at dinner, he didn't say a word about me. I guess the dumb things he did was A, not respect privileges that come with time in, and B, thought a sucker punch was the answer and told someone about it. Story 12. Not prison, but I was in juvenile hall. This was in Minnesota, and racial division isn't as strong up here, so even though I was half white, half Hispanic, since I was loosely affiliated with the blood gang, I was allowed to walk with the black guys in there, but I mostly kept my mouth shut and only got into fights when someone put hands on me. So this bigger black dude comes in for assault, and since he was a Crip, he was beefing with the group I was in, and starts talking crap about how our group was weak for having a white kid in it, and took shots at me. He got cocky and started pushing me around, so I pushed him back. And then he tried to tackle me, but I got him in a front face lock and kicked my legs back to drag him down. And as soon as I had him locked down, I started pushing my fist into his throat to choke him out. Eventually, we got broken up by 2 guards, and not gonna lie, I was effing terrified. But he got made fun of so much for losing to me, not only because I was white, but because he was bigger than me, that he immediately lost credibility after that. Story 13. There were 6 of us per cell, 3 thin metal bunks drilled against the left and right side walls, about 3 feet apart in height between each bunk. The bottom bunk was 3 feet off the ground as well, and we only had 1 empty top bunk left on my side, and that crap was like a 9-foot climb to get on it. 6th guy gets admitted in and starts demanding a bottom bunk, which I had one of them already. He was about 5'8", maybe 140 pounds. Mind you, I'm 6'2", 215 pounds, so he looked small compared to me. The guy on the other bottom bunk was much bigger than I am. Dude was easily around 6'6", probably pushing around 260. We both just stared at him. He grabbed the phone in the cell and started slamming it repeatedly against the box since we weren't paying attention to him. He must have watched some sort of movie or stupid prison guide or something, because he went straight for the other guy screaming and yelling. Big ass dude then got up from the bunk and walked toward him looking like a damn grizzly bear. He snatched the phone out of his hand and smacked the crap out of him across the face with it. He must have knocked the soul out of the little guy, because he had him sitting on the toilet for like 2 or 3 days straight, only getting up when one of us had to use it. His cheek was bruised for days too. He tried to sneak up on the top bunk in the middle of the night once, and the big ass dude grabbed him by his pants and pulled him straight off, and he hit the floor pretty hard next to me, and the guy told him to go sit back down. He requested a cell change, and of course it was denied. All in all, it was one hell of a warm welcoming. Story 14. The stupidest thing I've seen on someone's first day of prison is my own first day. I came in so addicted to Xanax and heroin, I was puking and crapping both green fluid, shaking, sweating, my temp was 104, my entire body felt like every single individual bone was breaking, and I've broken bones before, I know that pain. But the worst part wasn't that part, it was a psychotic crap I was hallucinating. Seeing people that weren't there and hearing people that weren't there, talking to people who were never there at all. I was having awful panic attacks, waking nightmares, and terrors. I was also having heart palpitations, and after a while, I started having seizures. It was at this point, specifically this point, that the medical staff decided that they should probably get involved and get me an anticonvulsant before I die in this effing cell with like 6 other dudes in it watching me. That was all I got though, nothing to ease the withdrawals at all. Even something like Subazone would stop my heroin withdrawals after a couple of days of being clean, and you can't get high off of it, but they literally don't care. So it went like that every day for weeks. Don't do drugs, and if you do, remember, severe Xanax withdrawal can very likely cause death. And severe Xanax withdrawal truly never ends. It can and will do permanent things to your psyche. Many people who abuse Xanax get clean, and months after the withdrawals get a thing called rebound anxiety. Xanax artificially reduces anxiety, which means your brain compensates by not releasing or producing and storing the chemicals to reduce anxiety. Every time you take a Xanax, you rob your brain's natural ability to reduce anxiety. And many people who never had mental health problems before will be diagnosed with severe anxiety disorders after severe long-term benzo use. F that crap. Story 15. There is a guy at the prison I was in. Let's call him Tyrone. Tyrone was the biggest, meanest, blackest guy in the prison, a full foot taller than most people, and everyone pretty much knew that he was running things on the inside. You needed a favor to be done? You talked to Tyrone. Somebody wouldn't stop beating on you? You talked to Tyrone. You had any problems with anybody whatsoever? You talked to Tyrone. He was the big black boss man in that prison. Obviously, because of this, everyone knows that you don't F with Tyrone. Don't take his seat, don't change his television channels, don't take his favorite food, nothing. It had already been like this for a couple years now, with Tyrone ruling with a firm grip and iron fist. He had little contenders, and those contenders he did have, he beat the F out of. So in walks this lanky-ass white guy who thinks he can own the place, and was probably used to being fed with a silver spoon or some crap. He straight away starts causing trouble. I heard people tell him to not do certain things because I could hear the audible, "Hey, white boy, don't do that." And because he was one of the only white guys in here, I knew they were talking to him. He didn't want to listen. Eventually, he attracted too much attention, and he saw big boy Tyrone coming over. He instantly knew he was the boss running things, and you could see he was wanting to start something with Tyrone, which he soon realized he wouldn't win. Pretty soon, a crowd started to gather to see what was going to happen. To see Tyrone beat the holy F out of this white guy, and he caught on too and wanted to prove himself. So this lanky-ass tiny white boy stands up, a full foot smaller than Tyrone, puts on his mean face, clenches his fist, looks him dead in the eye and says, "I'll suck your chicken on the reg if you keep me safe." Tyrone lets out a smirk and a quick laugh and says, "Yeah, you'll be alright, white boy. Drop by later," and walks off. That was the story of Tyrone and the white boy. So I feel like when you're already in prison, you've got nowhere further to deep yourself, so just selling your soul to stay alive and not get beat down on the regular, you do what you gotta do, right? Story 17. First day in jail, only time I've ever been and will ever go, that's for sure. Made the mistake of not keeping my stare in check at some dude's eyes. I kept eye-effing him, and anytime I get up from my chair in the pit, he'd come and put his coat down on my seat. I'm glad I never ate at the same time he did. He stared at my cell from his for a long time. Real F up. The doors click open for dinner, and my cellmate stayed asleep. I went down by myself and tried to do it all the right way. Wore shoes, brought my cup down, kept to myself. Minutes later, he comes out and yells at the whole pod, "Where my cellmate at? Who's my cellmate in 215? I said, "Right here." And this dude was huge, and he towered over into my face. "You're just gonna let a brother starve in here?" Saying that I'm racist and he's from Florida. He doesn't know what it's like out there in my state. Someone else says, "That's some real crap though." I don't know if it was my job to let him know there was food. I owned up to it and said it's not like that. I'm not racist, I've just never been locked up before. A person at our table said, "You gonna punk his ass?" He said no. I think they thought I couldn't understand them because their speech was so cryptic, in a barely audible and mouthful kind of way. Maybe some people know what I'm talking about. Anyways, I got back into the cell and I apologized, saying I just didn't know. He said, "This is the first time you ever been locked up?" Said, "Yeah." I apologized again, and he said, "Say no more, man." I figured he meant that literally. I shut the F up after that. Story 18. Jammed the toilet full of a big wad of paper. Cell was on top tier, flooded the entire block. For some insane reason, the toilets just constantly have water running, like they're constantly flushing. Not sure if that's a common thing. Dude came in, went to his cell, and immediately flooded the entire block while he was barricaded in his cell. Extraction unit came and stormed the unit, made everyone in the block lay face down in the flood water. Yes, the water from the toilet, which was legit 2 inches deep in the block. And then they pepper sprayed the F out of the dude's cell, which in turn meant that we all got pepper sprayed, while laying belly down outstretched in toilet water. This was in Georgia, so it was legit 100+ degrees in the block. Everyone was covered in toilet water and pepper spray. They drug the dude out. Everyone in the block was raging mad. 12 dudes maybe in the block. The dude was back in the block 3 days later. We were all still wearing the same jumpsuits because jail effing sucks and that's how it goes. Thank God for soap and showers. The dude promptly got his ass beat, was pulled from block. I assume he was taken to medical. He was fairly lumped up and bleeding. Was brought right back to the same block the same day. Got his ass beat again. After the second time, instead of moving him to another block, they locked him down in a cell. I was there for a month after that, and dude never once was out of the cell. No rec, no nothing. They literally just left him locked in the cell 24 hours a day. This was at a county jail. Effing brutal. F jail. Damn, telling that story just made me think of a bunch of effed up crap. Glad those days are behind me. Yeah, I mean, like, if you're forcing the entire cell to lay face down in a bunch of poop soup, you deserve to get beat down. So I actually back the cellies on this one. Story 19. Admitted he got arrested in a motel room with a 13-year-old girl. This was county jail, not prison. It's no longer true that predators get locked up because PREA and all that, but they definitely are hated and there's nothing that will change that. It's also not true that the biggest, toughest guy is the one who's respected unless it's high security. The man whose word means what he says and nothing less, and the man who fights only for his friends / himself and not for personal gain is the man everyone will respect. And that's all you have there. Who you are as a man and snacks. I told that kid on his first day to just accept whatever crap he gets for what he did and not to defend himself. Not physically, but like verbally. Because you're never going to redeem yourself in anyone's eyes at that point. Someone called him a sick effer, and this kid called him a female dog, and that was the last time he ate until he checked in, to protective custody. Jail is weird. You'll meet the very best people and the very worst people. If I didn't have a family that I felt I abandoned, you always will, then I would have a positive view of being incarcerated. Only like 70 to 80% of inmates are scumbags and criminals. That place will make them into absolute animals that are beyond saving, given enough time. Those other about 20% that do more than 6 weeks can come out of it with a heart and soul of pure gold, or they get put into segregation and their minds break. After 3 weeks, I saw my imaginary friend once. They were the most human of anyone I had for weeks. That kid had to spend the whole time like that, and he was 18 and scared. When he gets released, he's going to destroy some girl's life, and all that's going to matter is not getting caught. When that happens, it'll be the third time I've seen the exact same crap occur, just like that. If you end up in jail, don't say a word. Do not trust the people coming up to you. Look for the guy that everyone else is going to. The guy that isn't going to put on some tough guy act. And don't ever accept a 2 or 1 from anyone you didn't ask for something from. Story 20. My brother is in prison again, probably for a long time. Of course, I already know about it all, but just reading how ruthless and violent a lot of the inmates are makes me so mad. I worry that my brother fell down that hole 2 years ago, and I'll never get the same guy that I remember back. Every time he got out of prison, he was more different than the last. More cold, less empathetic, less able to read the room, way more violent, to the point where it was difficult to talk to him. I don't think he's getting out of it this time. Please try and stay out of jail, everyone. I know that sounds like a given, but you'd be surprised how many good people wrap themselves up in that kind of bullcrap. My brother went to juvie for the first time at around 12 to 13, I think, because my mother and his father were on drugs. He had nobody to help him, so he turned to the people on the street. He's been out a total of 4 years since then, and he's now 28, I think, as well as a father of 2 who his wife has had to raise. If you ever get caught up in illegal drugs, think about your loved ones. Think about your little sister, for example, who used to count down the days until you were released, visit you and bring you chocolates at 10 years old, and look forward to your release like a kid on Christmas morning, then just cry when you went back in a week later because you miss your brother so much. Think about the fact that your loved ones will get to the point where they kind of just have to give up on you, including your kids and your parents and whoever else, including your little sister who's not so little anymore and just saw you on national television doing a horrible thing that makes her feel completely embarrassed and ashamed, but used to it. They're going to have to stop caring about you for their own health and happiness, and that's a sad thing. Be careful out there. Story 21. Oh man, this was my fave. My first day, too. 2014. It was a 30-day weekend sentence at the largest provincial prison in Quebec called Bordeaux Prison. They house like 2,000 people for a max duration of 2 years minus a day. Since I was in school, they broke up my sentence into weekends. Lucky, especially as an Anglophone from Arizona. Yeah, long story. So my first day, I get to like a 40-foot red steel door. I knock and a guard opens the shutter asking my name. I give it and my name isn't in the log. He plays a prank on me saying that it normally means I don't have to stay, but with a short phone call, they confirm this is my home for the weekend. Wrecked. We are put into groups of 10 going through security similar to an airport luggage check. Some guys just got off a bus and are starting their lengthy sentence, and others are just doing the weekend thing like I was. This prison is a small world for Montreal lawbreakers. I enter the group room with one other dude that I heard is having his first ever day there, and I hear a guy shout out, "Bro, Sam, what are you doing here?" So now the guy I was coming in with knows a dude, and it's a guy that's been there for 30 weekends so far. Now I feel really out of place. They're old school buddies, and yeah, Sam seemed relieved. Guards tell us to get up and let's go to the fun room. We get there and it looks almost like getting in line for a roller coaster. 10 rows and 10 guards. Instead of it being bars, it's tile walls that are high as my belly button maybe. I'm 5'9", so they're like tile cubicles for the strip search. It's more to direct people, not so much to cover you from other inmates seeing your goods, but yeah, anyways. We each walk into our tiled cubicle and there's 9 male guards and 1 female. I get the female, so I'm not even sure if I feel better about that. Experience 30 weekends. Guy is on my left and Sam is on my right. He whispers over to Sam, "Just do as they say. They don't F around. It's no biggie, trust me." 30 weeks is told to open his mouth, lift his tongue, and then turn around and bend over. He does it. "Spread your cheeks," the guard says. He does it, and the officer gets in for a closer look. They rub from bottom up across your hole to see if there's a stash in there. He turns around that the guard says, "Lift your testes," and has a flashlight to check. They even pinch the shaft to make sure there's no crap in the urethra. Yeah, I've heard some stories. I just got all my clothes off for this officer girl, and Sam is starting with the mouth part. He passes. They go right for the balls first on Sam, though. They say, "Please lift your testes," and he replies with, "No." 30 Weeks looks over at me with his eyes open and whispers to Sam, "Lift your sack, bro." It goes back and forth for a bit while tension is really rising. All the guards start to leave each inmate during the check, and they walk over to his row as if something might go down. We're just a bunch of naked guys standing in a row with fairly large police ranked guards closing in on Sam. His assigned guard says, "Last time, Samuel, lift your effing balls." 30 Weeks is yelling at Sam to listen. I'm tripping out, and the other guys are laughing and enjoying the show. Sam yells back, "I don't lift my effing sack for no one." Crap escalates. 3 guards drop him to the floor, put his hands behind his back while he's trying to wrestle his naked ass out of it. 2 more guards get in, and one puts his knee and his head against the hard tile. Sam is screaming about killing them. them. 1 guard goes in and finger bangs his ass for a drug test. Everyone yells, "Ow!" 1 guard goes in and finger bangs his ass for a drug test. Everyone yells, "Ow!" 1 guard goes in and finger bangs his ass for a drug test. Everyone yells, "Ow!" 1 guard goes in and finger bangs his ass for a drug test. Everyone yells, "Ow!" 1 guard goes in and finger bangs his ass for a drug test. Everyone yells, "Ow!" 1 guard goes in and finger bangs his ass for a drug test. Everyone yells, "Ow!" 1 guard goes in and finger bangs his ass for a drug test. Everyone yells, "Ow!" 1 guard goes in and finger bangs his ass for a drug test. Everyone yells, "Ow!" 1 guard goes in and finger bangs his ass for a drug test. Everyone yells, "Ow!" 1 guard goes in and finger bangs his ass for a drug test. Everyone yells, "Ow!" 1 Ooh, like that meme from the movie Friday. They flip him over and slap his chicken around and swipe the gooch. He's clean. They grab him by the arms and drag him out on his stomach while you can hear his chicken and balls getting tile burn on the ground. The combination of him screaming and the squeaking skin on tile is embedded in my head. They drag him through a giant thick metal door that's buzzed open. My heart is pounding. My guard walks back in front of me and she starts off with, "Can you please," and looks down. My sack is way yanked up. I think I've had my sack up the whole time. She laughs and grabs my stuff with a couple squeezes and says, "Turn around." Flashlights my hole and doesn't even put a finger near my a-hole. She gets close to me and says, "You're one of the good ones. Get dressed." See, I like to think she was talking about my goods, but who knows? We all got into jumpsuits and left through an entirely different door than the one Sam was dragged through. I never saw Sam again. This was our first hour on my first day. Story 22. I got a story about my first week in jail. I'm in my early 20s. First time ever in trouble for anything. Real wet behind the ears. So my first week there, we're lining up for clothes exchange, and a deputy and inmate from my pod get into a fight. They lock us down, and as we are, a deputy is going door to door asking each inmate if they saw anything. Obviously, everyone's saying no. Not me, though. I was raised to tell the truth, so I did. Told the deputy exactly what I saw. Inmate started in deputy, blah blah blah. Yep, I said that, fresh in a pod where everyone could hear me. I'm thinking nothing of it. Hey, I did my duty. Got the real side of the story out. That's what's up. They get it all sorted and release us for day room. I'm watching TV, oblivious to what I really just actually did. The black rep sits down to talk to me. First thing he says is, "You know in prison you could get killed for what you did." And I laughed, thinking he was joking. I was effing oblivious to jailhouse rules. He looked me dead in my eyes to show how serious he was. He explained to me that 1, we never side with the deputies, no matter what, and 2, races deal with their own. For me, being black, to put my nose into something that happened to a white inmate, that's all bad. He explained to be careful. I knew nothing would happen to me. He explained that I was good. Don't ask me how he knew, but he knew. And I was the rest of my stay. But he really opened my eyes to how serious my new situation in jail was. I ended up being a chow server because the deputies felt like they could trust me. Got extra time out of my cell, longer visits, and extra food. F it. The person I snitched on was already having issues in the pod, and people didn't like him. He ended up in AdSeg for a while. So let that be a lesson. If you're an inmate, don't talk to the deputies. I was dumb. Story 23. Not prison. Waiting to get bail. In the dog kennels with 20 to 30 others, maybe 20 full kennels, 2 courts going overtime. This was a Thursday before a long weekend, which meant that courts closed for 4 days. Everyone desperate to have their chance in front of the judge. A bid for bail and freedom, managing to avoid the extra 4-day lockdown. Anyway, once I'd been called, had my bail approved, get brought to processing for a few more hours. Processing area right next to pre-hearing kennel area. So I was up fairly early in the day, almost first out of the gate, if first kennel. One guy in my kennel was a rattling and scratching crackhead. He went up and spat across court at the judge. Must have got him or someone else. Next thing I know, they got this crackhead hauled back down into the kennels. They closed down the whole court and marked it as a crime scene. Now there's an army of pissed off crims that want to stomp the crackhead because they don't get to see the judge to get bail. Almost caused a riot. Forgot to mention that. He ended up in protection in an isolated self-unaliving watch cell to stop everyone getting to him. Stupidest thing I've ever seen in my life. Funny thing is, the crackhead would have been bailed too. Got no idea why he did it. Drugs, man, they can make people crazy. Well, you just answered your own question. Drugs make people crazy and do insane things and get locked up in jail, so don't do them. Story 24. Not the stupidest thing I've seen, but an interesting story no less. I did time a couple years ago. Non-violent convicts in my prison were able to get gate pass jobs, meaning a handful of us reported after breakfast at 6 a.m. to the outbound prisoner holding area. This is where they sent us and prisoners who were transferring to another facility, i.e., they were getting into too much crap that they needed to be moved somewhere else. They had too many points, so their security level got upped and they could no longer stay, etc. Hell, I know some guys in my prison in mid-Michigan who got shipped up to a facility in the Upper Peninsula near the border of Wisconsin, aka they got sent way the F far away from home. Anyways, not to be sidetracked. So myself and a few others went to work every morning at another prison. We rode in a van across the street. I was a porter, so I cleaned the front of the house where the family sit before visiting their inmate. Cleaning bathrooms, windows, taking out trash, etc. Other guys were yard and maintenance crew. We got extra food, and we were essentially free. If we wanted, we were outside of prison cells and could make a run for it. But having this job had its downside. The porter I worked with was about to get out. Turns out, he was running drugs from work back to our prison to make some extra cash. He told me I could get in on it and take over when he left. He said it's easy. They drop it in the trash in the women's bathroom. You take it back, all good. Just gotta make it through the strip search, which was very relaxed as these COs saw our chicken swinging every day. Nobody wants to do that, especially when we were considered non-violent and privileged. I told him I wasn't into it many times, but I was in too deep. I already knew too much. So some random day, I'm laying in my bunk watching TV, and some random from a different cube on the other side of the building came in and was like, "Let me holler at you a minute." So I went and we talked and I said I'm not into it. That didn't stop him or several others coming at me to persuade me differently. Every time I gave the same answer. I'm sorry, I'm just here to do my time. Now, mind you, I'm 2 months from going home. I'm not telling people this because there's some effed up crap people will do to threaten you if they know you're going home soon. One of my best friends, even to this day, finally came out to the yard with me, and I went to the original person recruiting me and I told him, listen, I don't want to do the job. I'd appreciate if you leave me alone and I hope it works out. I'm 6'1", 170, and have no fighting bones in my body. I'm a female dog, but I handled it like a man and never heard from them the rest of my time. Story 25. I was in Orange County Jail late 2009 and early 2010. When I was in there, I saw all sorts of crap, but one time a guy rolled into the dorm downstairs from us. The way the dorms work is there's 64 men in a pod, and there are 2 levels which are independent. We could see and interact with the floor below us, but only through looking at a mirrored glass wall the cops watched us through. Anyways, a guy comes in around midnight, and when someone comes in, it makes quite a bit of noise sometimes, especially if the person isn't considerate. I'm still awake, and so I just happened to be sitting up. I see the guy walk in and immediately put his bedroll on a bottom bunk near the entrance. This is a big no-no, as you're usually assigned a bunk by whoever's leading your race in the pod. Leader of the pod comes in and tells him to move to a top bunk. I'll never forget this dude. His name was Cyclone, and he was absolutely the white brotherhood type crowd. Anyways, words are exchanged, and new guy's not taking us seriously. Cyclone braces himself between 2 bunks and lifts himself up, kind of like you would do dips, except the bunks are fairly tall, and put his heel directly in the guy's face, knocking the new guy out cold. I mean, like dropped like a 200-pound sack of potatoes. Cops came, turned on the lights, and made everyone downstairs show their knuckles. New guy didn't snitch on the guy who hit him, and nothing happened. Cops went away. 3 minutes later, everyone is complaining about a smell. Turns out, new guy crapped his pants upon being knocked out. Pod leader ends up calling the sheriffs in to get a mop to clean up said crap. New guy ended up rolling out the next morning early, mysteriously. Story 26. That's easy. He cried. He got a DUI and a hit and run. His cellmate was cool at first, then later that night he cried and woke him up. Next thing I heard was him being slammed to the floor and then wrestling. I can only assume he was SA'd. The stupidest thing I did was trade my cookies for someone's juice. Desserts were treated like gold. Phone time was the single most valuable thing in jail. I remember loading my account with $100. I was there for 7 days and used maybe $40 and had 60 left. My cellmate asked me for the access code when he learned I got bond. I told him, but kinda loudly because I was packing my stuff. Next thing I know, I see 4 people running to the phone. They're all happy and yelling at me, "Thank you, amigo! Ah, yeah, amigo! There, gave us $60 in calls!" Always know someone's listening. I was the only Hispanic in a cell block of 26 blacks, 1 white and me. Just shut the F up. Don't gamble. Grab books when they're offered. Helps fluff the pillows, and use your TP as well. Use a towel when you're taking a crap, common courtesy. Again, don't be provoked. Just pass the time as if you don't care, but don't be cocky. Don't talk about your crimes. Why would you want to anyways? Story 27. 1. Try not to tell us what he was allegedly in for, so eventually we did some digging and found out he was gonna SA charge. We beat the crap out of him. Literally. Crap and blood was all over the floor. 2. Another guy, when we asked him if he brought anything, meaning drugs up his ass, his reply was, "F that, I'm not a criminal piece of crap." He got jumped and beat up before even getting to see the inside of his cell. 3. Another guy who was an ex-military guy came onto a range and started proudly boasting how he killed over 11 Muslims in Afghanistan. He got sort of lucky because he did this as soon as he came out onto the range when guards were still there. They took him off range and put him in segregation for a few months. One of the guards told us he never seen any crap like that. The guy must have had a death wish. When he eventually got out of the hole, he jumped and effed up badly, but it wasn't on my range. 4. This one's just a funny story, sort of along the lines of Scared Straight. The jail was on overflow and minimum security was packed. This kid was maybe 18 and 19 years old, was brought to Max on his first day. He was in for stealing from a grocery store. Well, we decided to just sort of tease him, and we did. I, along with others, convinced him he was going to be passed around while he was here. We all decided our order of whose cell he would be coming to for the next few days till his court date. Eventually, by the end of it, I told him, if you just grab onto this sock on my waist, you're my female dog and my female dog only. He looked around and other people told him that's true, so he yanked the sock super quick. We all just started laughing and told him it's all a joke. But later on, a fight broke out where some guy got beat up by 3 people pretty badly when we went to lock down. The kid climbed into his bunk and tied all his bed sheets around himself and just stayed like that for the entire weekend till he had court on Monday. He kept asking his cellmate if he was safe, and his cellmate kept saying, don't worry about it. People just like to pick on the new fish. He had court on Monday and got released. I bet he never committed a crime again after that. Story 29. I've heard some stupid crap. People telling me they don't remember crap, that they're innocent, that they didn't hurt their SO that bad. I don't know, man. Anytime I've had to do time, I got straight in my cell and started doing push-ups and don't stop till my sentence is done. Nobody F's with the guy who minds his business and just exercises in his cell all day. By the way, if you've never been locked up before, when you eat your ramen packs, only use half of the seasoning. Save the other half for chow time. That crap never has flavor. Wear your chino slides in the shower. Get up early to shower to have hot water. Respect those who've been in your pod the longest. Maintain a good relationship with the inmates whose cells are by phones. They can save it for you to make sure you're the first to use it before anyone else. Grind up soap and put it in a sock and sprinkle that crap around every time someone in the cell takes a crap. And read. Nobody has the heart to F with a bookworm. Thank me later. Hopefully not, though. I've only had 2 major problems in jail, which led to me being in the hole for 2 months straight, and they were always altercations with guys who didn't abide by these rules, or crackheads that tried stealing your crap because they didn't know who you are and how much respect you had in the pod. Willie Johnson, if you're reading this by any chance, I never got to see you after they separated us, but how the F did that broken nose feel? Story 30. So this actually happened to me. When I was in a pre-trial center, they were replacing all the locks in my unit. Not sure if it was just my unit or all of them. So they kept us in the gymnasium all day. One half, there was a big folding divider down the middle, had a TV and PS2 and food. Bread, toaster, and margarine, lol. And the other side had a blue mat for each inmate with bathrooms on either side. I had to crap, so I just went for the closest bathroom. About halfway through my crap, I was lucky I was already on a toilet, because it sounded like an enraged silverback was pounding on the door demanding to know what the F I was doing in the bathroom. So I opened the door and told this effing Goliath that I just had to crap. He said he was going to kill me because that's a bathroom where they smoke weed and blow it into the toilet. I had no idea that if you bail out the shutter, it sucks the smoke into the pipes. Luckily, the unit's new guy came over and saved my ass big time, and they just made me scrub the crap out of the bottom and re-bail the toilet. I was terrified and really started to rethink my life at that point. Story 31. You know, I have a story. So I've been to jail once. Twice on the same case, actually. I'm a suburban kid and I effing know it. I got extradited down the middle of nowhere and booked in at like midnight. The thing is, I really need mental stimulation to relax. There was one cellie with like a Hitler history book and a thorn crown tattoo on his forehead, along with the phrase, "I'm not human." I woke his ass up and asked for his book, to which he obliged. Had some weird late-night reading and drifted off. We talked the next morning and he said he couldn't tell if I was stupid or if it was just my first time in jail. I said a little of both and thanked him. We both actually got released later that day and dude offered me a place to stay. I was kind of flat broke in the middle of nowhere and it was like -4 degrees out. So I ended up staying in a church property with this dude overnight while I got crap together. Scared for my effing life, to be honest. Honestly, dude was out there. Absolute drug addict. Well-known town, homeless and recurrent county inmate. He was well-intentioned, though, I think. Seemed like the kind of person the system just failed. I remember being thankful that a church had tried to intervene and hoping that man found more in his life. Story 32. There's a lot of stupid things you can do, but for me, the smartest thing you can do is what probably saved me a lot of hassles and maybe even a beating or two. When I was arrested, I had a paycheck from work on me, close to $700. I don't know how it works elsewhere, but in Canada, any money you have on you gets deposited into your prison canteen account, canteen or commissary, the store inside jail you can order food from. So with my check deposited, I was flush. On remand, I had seen guys run stores out of their cells. Basically, you have a bunch of food from canteen that you loan out to other cons, with interest. Oh, you want to play in the poker game, or you want to make a bet on the football game, but canteen is only once a week and you don't have anything to wager with? Come see the store and get a 6-pack of soda and pay back 9 on canteen day. 2 bags of chips, pay back 3, etc. When I got off remand and was sent to federal prison, for the first few days I watched people and finally figured out who was the most respected, most feared con. Turns out it was this big Native American guy who was doing 25 years for shooting a RCMP officer in the face. Big guy plus killed a cop equals respect. His name was Junior, and no one effed with Junior. So one day I approached him and started talking, and thankfully we hit it off. I proposed a partnership with him. I had some money and wanted to run a store. You be the muscle and collect if someone wouldn't pay. I'll run the store and we'll be splitting everything 50-50. He agreed and we were off to the races. Now I had the most feared guy in the joint as a friend, and I was his source of income, so he could pay for tattoos or drugs and you didn't F with Junior's payday. If anything happened to me and I got taken off his cell block or worse, anything that interfered with him making his cut every week, there would be hell to pay, and he didn't F around. I saw him put a shank against a guy's throat over unpaid chocolate bars. We became good friends to boot, and now I had unsaid protection and a steady source of income. Plus, I had a prescription inside Wellburitin, an antidepressant that, when crushed and snorted, is basically like a mild cocaine, which I sold to other inmates sometimes, and you don't F with any source of drugs inside. No one wants the guy who gets legal cocaine beaten and sent to the hospital, or another block or sent to another jail. Sorry for the long explanation. Basically, make yourself valuable. Between that and being respectful, you're golden. Story 33. Long story short, I was in PC, and I normally shared a cell designed for one person with 2 other guys. At the time we received this particular third, I'd already spent a number of weeks with this guy in for attempted murder of his sister-in-law. He said he was just driving the car, like I gave a crap. So they dumped this skinny kid in the cell. He's got a bloody nose, so he's sniffing like crazy, but he apparently just wants to be left alone. Fine by me. It might have been my first time in jail, but I know how to mind my own business. My cellie, however, being more of a career criminal, wanted to badger him about his charges. Eventually, he told us what happened. He'd been talking to a girl on the bus, thought she liked him, and so grabbed her box. Now, this was way before Trump running for president of the US was a thing. For some reason, maybe just the way he said it or that it came out of nowhere, but this was hilarious to us for a good few minutes. When we caught our breath, we're like, dude, you know you can't just do that, right? Long story short, he wasn't repentant about it, and my cellie had him kicked out of our cell on threat of violence. The lesson of the story is, especially if you're in PC, have a cover story if you're in on sex charges. Don't make people question it, don't talk about your charges if you can help it, and mind your own damn business. I saw graffiti in a Lindsay holding cell that said something along the lines of, PCs know how to be solid. That is, unlike the general population, we don't try to pry about people's charges. We don't snitch, and we mind our own business, and we do our own time. It's self-serving, sure, but if I don't know about your bad charges and you don't know about mine, then we can coexist without feeling obligated to act out. It's a perfect example of ignorance is bliss. Seriously though, attempted murder cellie was a pain in the ass. He was unhappy about a CO lying about the weather to avoid letting us go to the yard, so he covered the window and implied that he was going to hurt me. Put me in the awkward position of having to choose to either not answer and let him think I was hurt, or disobeying a guy twice my size and saying that I was fine. He wasn't the worst cellie I had, nor was that the worst situation I was in that year, but he was one of the few I tried to quietly get removed because I was sick of him starting crap with the COs. Still, the guy was not dumb, just not well educated, and he'd demolish me at chess. Story 34. Not my story, but my dad's. This would have taken place back in the 70s. He was in jail, and there is a very strong racial divide. He said that people might have respect for certain others in other racial groups if they were particularly tough or strong or noble or whatever, but they didn't really mix much. White guys were generally automatically assumed to be the weaker group, and so all the whites had to be as crazy as they could be. If anyone effed with one of them, all the white guys had to go off. Bring the whole effing place down. A new white guy came into the jail. He was from the suburbs and not the city. The other white guys immediately came to talk to himself and tell him to join their group, explaining they all had to stick together. The new guy said, "No way," and had a very PC speech prepared about how hard black people have it or whatever. A week or so later, he asked a black guy for shorts on a cigarette. The guy looked at him, smirked, and said, "Sure, white boy," and flicked the cig across the room. "Pick it up." My dad and his group watched as the new guy went and picked it up off the floor and smoked the rest. They immediately went to the warden and explained that this guy was going to get killed. He was taken out of Gen Pop for the rest of his stay there and I think was eventually transferred. Story 35. There's so many, but this was my cellmate, so I remember it well. He got on his phone and called his girlfriend, who he locked up for beating up and pointing a gun at, and talked about everything he did and apologized. He wasn't supposed to have any contact with her at all, so he got an extra charge for that, and they had him on tape admitting to everything he did, which they used against him because his girlfriend ended up saying she wouldn't press charges or testify. In the end, they didn't need her because they had the recordings. I told him after the first call that they record that crap and listen to the tapes, especially when you first go in because you're probably going to call someone and explain why you're in there and what happened. After that, the damage was done, but he kept calling her, so you can't say I didn't warn him. He ended up taking a deal where he got out after a few months in county with a crapload of crazy probation. 2 strikes and an 8-year suspended sentence if he violates probation. I don't know whatever happened to him, but I don't see him not violating probation in the future. Story 36. I was on the workers' camp portion of a maximum security prison in Texas, Beto Unit, which is located on about 20,000 acres of farmland. We did things like feed and clean hog barns, run the tracking dogs, drive tractors and such. It wasn't fenced in, like the giant, poured concrete 3-story structure that was the main building directly across from us that housed a lot of mostly 20 to 50-year-old people with capital murder sentences, child essayers, etc. It was the closest thing to freedom you could get in prison, and the prison we were part of is one of the most notorious/dangerous places in Texas. Some new guy came into the camp and he was told his job was back gate, and what time he normally went to work. When it's time to turn out for work, a boss will call you and tell you to turn out for work, which is a process where you go up to the front of the camp, strip out, and get signed out, and then you'll take a right on the road and walk about a quarter mile, then a left and another quarter mile, and you're at the back gate. Well, when it was time for him to work, he just took off walking and skipped all that, and took a left instead of a right, walked all the way past this prison, walked past another prison unit where TDCJ intakes new inmates, past the warden's house, and got all the way past the watchtowers, with rifles, questioning anything before he got to the main public road where the guard shack was before that guy completely freaked out. They quickly locked him up in the main building, thinking he was trying to escape. Basically went from heaven to hell on earth on his first day. Story 37. These 2 guys just got locked up for the night, and one inmate started talking to them, offering food, cigarettes, etc. One of the guys was falling so hard for it that at some point his friend that had been quiet told him to stop and just mind his own business. The first guy kept going at it, and both of them got some cookies, orange soda, cigarettes, and some blankets for the night. The next day, when they were about to leave, and as expected, the inmate claimed they owed him. The first guy started to argue that it was all a gift. Suddenly, everybody in the back started moving in a very suspicious way. The quiet guy offered a kick-ass jacket he had as collateral. When they were out, the inmate told him how close they were to getting a new scar in their faces. I was the quiet guy, worst night of my life, all because that stupid a-hole couldn't get himself away from the bars and tried to make prison friends. Story 38. Former CO, the best is when a newbie is getting dressed in and you tell him to take his clothes off and hand them to you, and he just looks at you and asks for privacy. We've had so many that refuse, and then you tell them, you're not the first man that's had to strip down. The ones that refuse go from county blues to county yellow, with a little county black on them eyes. SHU is a female dog for a newbie. My second story, there was a white dude that got into a fight with the city cops and was in on some serious charges for murder for hire. The city are female dogs and don't like fighting, so we would have to go pull out their prisoners out of their vehicles. I had a partner on SWAT that was 6'3", 320 pounds, a real brick crap house of a man. I'm 6 feet, 250 pounds. We ask the guy to get out of the car and he says no. We tell him, listen man, just get out of the car, we can book you in and then you can talk on the phone. The guy refuses. My buddy says, pull this mother effer out. The guy says to me, if that N-word touches me, I'll kill both of you. My buddy takes out these black gloves and starts to pull them on, and I pull out the vinyl gloves I had, and the dude looks at my hands and then my buddy's and says, why are your gloves different than his? What are you going to do with those? My buddy, still adjusting his gloves, says, these go around your throat. The guy nearly craps himself, turns an even whiter shade than he already is, and starts sweating. I don't think I've seen reality set in quite that hard before. The guy, after being pat down and searched, pukes all over the transfer cell. My buddy says, what the F, man? Oh, crap. Mother effer, you gonna clean this crap up? The guy says, yes, sir. Sir, yes, what you say. I'm so glad I don't do that crap no more. Best and worst job I ever had. Story 39. I'm late and this will probably get buried. I had a guy come in on his first day and decided he would try to beat up the biggest, toughest looking dude in the yard. Now, bear in mind, this isn't the US, this is Belgium. So generally speaking, there's a minimal amount of gangs here. They still exist, but they're less violent and not as aggressive. Anyway, he didn't realize that the big tough guy was indeed very big and insanely strong, but he also had a mental disability. Safe to say, the new dude won easily, and when the big guy was on the ground with a broken nose, broken arm, and dislocated shoulder, he looked around looking real happy about it. I've never seen a Belgian prison turn so violent. The new dude was beaten to a greasy pulp and never returned to Gen Pop. Later heard from a guard that he had severe brain damage and was moved to the hospital wing. Never saw him again. Second, this dude came in acting tough, thinking it would be exactly like juvie. He learned pretty quickly that it wasn't, and he crapped in the shower. Twice, which the other inmates had to clean. He was in a cell with a 60-something-year-old dude who was the most gentle guy I've ever met. He was in jail for shooting a burglar, but in Belgium, guns aren't nearly as accessible as in other countries, so he got charged for murder. He didn't get sentenced for that because self-defense, but he was charged with illegal possession of a firearm, which amounted to 5 years, 4 years in jail, and 1 year house arrest. Still keep in touch with him to this day. Really sweet dude. Oh, I'm rambling. So, of course, what the new guy decided to do was self-pleasuring. Really effing loudly. I could hear it from my bunk at the other side of the cell block. Now, this is 60-something-year-old dude was having none of it. So he got up from his bunk and asked him to cut it out and go find a toilet or something. Turns out, the best course of action was to beat the man. Yes, a newly 18-year-old punched a 60-year-old. His sentence was originally like a year. Well, he got slapped with 5 more years for aggravated assault and assault on the elderly. Yes, that's a thing here. Karma is a female dog. I have one more. This was actually me. This one is pretty funny. So I just got in, charged with SA, if a minor isn't as bad as it sounds. I was 21 years old, my girlfriend was 17. We're still together, by the way. Well, her parents went to the police, and because of the age of consent is 18 in Belgium, I got charged, all that jazz, very fun, 3 years in prison. Okay, so I got in, very nervous. I was a stereotypical nerd with glasses, no muscle, just brain. Well, the old guy mentioned above decided he would befriend me and gave me some tips, but he left out one thing, which he thought was common sense. If the wet floor sign was outside, if the showers, some dude was self-pleasuring, well, I walked in, oblivious, only to come face to face with a guy furiously beating his meat. I nopes out of there really quickly. Must have looked kind of funny. New dude goes and showers, bolts out of it 2 seconds later. I make sure to tell every new guy I got in contact with to never go in the shower when the sign is in there. Story 40. Third time of the first day. 20 years old, in jail, not prison. Picked up for possession and contributing to delinquency of minors. I had just finished a deal. My buddy's underage brother and friend was walking by, carrying a bunch of beer and asked to sit down in my car for a minute. Soon after, cops walk by and see them in the back with the beer. Getting to the short, we all go to jail. Buddy's brother is 17, so he goes home. It's me and his friend, and they put us in two separate cells. 30 minutes in, I hear dude yelling, "I don't know what you're talking about. I'm not Frankie," while being assaulted by his new cellmate. So they put us together, while his violent tweaker, previous cellmate, yells down the block to the girl he was arrested with, asking her to marry him, then offering anyone $10K to get him out. I swear I got the money. Cops arrested some old hippie dude soon after, impounded his van, took his dog, said he was a suspect in a heist. He happened to turn around in a parking lot just after the cop showed up. The business had gotten broken into earlier, and they brought him in for returning to the crime. A few hours later, they realized it was the crazy dude in the cell next to us who did it and let the hippie go. Hip asks if he could stay until morning because his van was his home. Impound is closed for the night. And where was his dog? Cops told him there was nothing they could do. The next day, a kid who was along with a drug dealer friend from earlier the day before wound up in jail with me for trying to steal the car I'd been driving, my roommate's car, as it was still sitting in the same spot on the side of the road since my subsequent incarceration. I only learned the reason afterwards, or I'd have fought him for lack of respect, and probs got my ass beat. The rest of my stay was uneventful, but gives you an idea of the fun you might experience in 24 hours of lockup. And one day can easily become 5 days if you go in on a Friday. Story 41. When I was locked up, when fresh people came in that you could tell have never been locked up or had never been to that facility before, they would get effed with multiple ways in varying degrees of intensities. We had this computer kiosk thing next to the phones you order your commissary from and request trips to medical, etc. And it looked like a computer screen with a touchscreen pad. When the newbies came in, people would tell them crap like, "Yo, the county doesn't start your time until you scan your mattress on the computer." People would usually wait until someone had been there a few days to tell them this. You would see the person, all awkward and nervous, start panicking and drag their mattress pad out in the cell and to the middle of the pod to the kiosk. All mattress pads had a tag sewn into it that had serial numbers and a barcode on it. You would see the guy picking up his limp mattress pad and drag it across the screen over and over, then start lightly slapping the mattress tag against the screen to try and get it to scan. The whole time, people would be yelling at him to scan it differently. Depending on who the CO was in the pod at the time was the deciding factor if the inmate got smoked for it or not. Story 42. Friend of mine is a CO here in Pennsylvania. He said they had this punk-ass white kid gangsta come in on a third-degree murder charge, 10 to 20-year sentence. Mind you, he never pulled the trigger and didn't kill anyone, but it was part of a robbery, so he was charged because it happened on commission of another felony. Anyways, he said this kid was a mouthy POS from day one, refused orders from the COs, etc. He figured because he had a murder charge, he could do what he wanted. So my friend and another CO were taking him and a few other inmates to the nurse. Anyways, when my friend asked him to do something, he told him to go F himself. At this point, he had enough of this punk kid, so he said, "I'm gonna fix your ass." He sent him and the whole group he was with to the hole. Needless to say, he had just pissed off the others because they're getting punished for his stupidity. So he said the day they were getting out, he went to the kid and said, "You learned your lesson yet?" And wouldn't you know it, the kid told him to go F himself again, thus canceling everyone getting out. Few weeks after they got out, this kid wound up in medical, severely beaten and sodomized so bad he had to have surgery to repair his rectal area. Moral of the story, you mess with the bull, you get the horns, or in this case, the D. I think that, this is an appropriate way to handle insubordination as you punish everybody else that's in the cell with them, guilty by association. They're going to be mad and they're going to punish the guy that's being rebellious appropriately, and you don't have to do anything. That's actually pretty smart. Story 43. I'm a current CEO in county jail going on 10 years now. I worked a minimum security unit for a few years. New inmates sentenced to less than a year would arrive to the unit around the same time each day. The unit had an open roof and a grassy area between the housing pod entrances. There were 3 very large sewer covers in the middle of the grass to allow for water drainage. My coworker and I decided we should drag the fire hose out to the sewer cover to prank the new arrivals. I escorted the new arrivals to the housing pod, and upon arrival, all the new guys were instructed to line up on the sidewalk and wait, while I get the cell assignments. I went into my office overlooking the grassy area, while my partners come from the opposite hallway with a broomstick in his hand. He walks into the grass and starts to address the new inmates, telling them the rules and expectations while on the housing unit. Rule number 1, everybody must be standing for head count. My coworker then jams the broomstick into the sewer drain, poking and jabbing. while yelling at the hidden inmate below and threatening to use the hose again. New inmates' jaws dropped to the ground so low you could have parked a garbage truck in there. The inmates inside the pods gave away the joke when they were laughing and banging on the glass, making fun of the new guys. "Welcome to the pod, mother effers." We were laughing about it for weeks with the inmates. Needless to say, we were a fun group of COs to work with. Story 44. Wasn't happy with the way things were at Chow before lockdown. For Count impersonated an inmate orderly, there was surely 2 minutes left till lockdown. That was, I'm sure, the thought process. Walking towards the back of the kitchen, spots the silver cart, opens the door, and there's lots of fajita chicken with spices, sprinkled pepper. No wrap though. As soon as my eyes caught a glimpse after attempting to pull the tray out before realizing there are these sliders on top of each other. The last 10 slots must pull the tray completely out before the lid can be open, just as one would in any situation that's ensnaring. The thought of just one quick handful was enticing too soon. That tray, and that tray only, fell over. Well, that's just the beginning for this poor fella. Not to mention the CEO at the post, stationed in unit, had willingly given this man 2 biohazard bags to put his personal hygiene in. There was chicken spilled on the floor, a loud racket moments ago, yet Chicken was urging this obviously hungry specimen. So, kicking the conspicuous chicken under the cart, he then proceeded to pull 2 more trays completely out and began filling the hazard bags, which only needed 1 tray. Why 2? He does not know, just was hungry. The poor guy. Anyway, walking slowly out of the kitchen in a kind of swaying, kind of bold way, there was no indication things were at all suitable for rules. Glancing over at the post, he quick snaps his neck back and front and walks step by step. As the bulge pronounces itself most affording, lol. Buck yells "Hostler" after noticing every single inmate is in the cell looking out their panel window. This lost pup done did the most with this already. Ain't he the kid that thought he was gone exercising our platform? What's that? Huh? You heard me. What's in your pockets? Oh, well, I was just putting things I like in there from arts and craft. Oh yeah? Let's see. For real, I was just on my way to sell, sir. I'll be headed back, I promise. Let's see, or I'll pull them out for you. Pulling them out for him, then the quiet unit burst in laughter and Buck is mesmerized himself as a smirk then graces his old pale and pasty skin. Okay, Hoistler, I'm gonna have to write you up, okay? Yep, what's the punishment? 3 days cell confinement. Ha, is that all? Oh, you want me to throw 2 more on? I can. Nah, sir, I'm good. Thanks. Audience, I don't know what the hell I just read. If you can make head or tails of this final story, please comment down below. I'm just reading what's on the script. I apologize. Have a great day.